Hello and welcome to the CourseMaker podcast. Today I'm pleased to introduce our guest, Andrea Bizzotto, who's an online course author with over 22,000 students on Udemy and a 4.7 out of 5 average rating, which is super impressive. He has courses on Flutter, Dart, and Firebase. And also, Andrea's site is a real gold mine of video tutorials, articles, and a newsletter. So, Andrea, really looking forward to our chat.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the introduction. I think you introduced me better than I would do myself. So maybe we need to work together.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I was saying, you've got loads of great content in the form of courses and articles and videos. But before we dig into all that sort of stuff, can you tell us a bit about how you got into programming and your background?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm from Italy, and in terms of how I got into coding, I always had a lot of computers around in my house when I was a kid. So yeah, when I was young, my main interest really was just playing games, and I had lots of different things that could keep me occupied. And I think around my teens, I started kind of looking more into computers in depth. And at the time, I think it was the time of 56K modems and pretty slow connections. So I remember the first tools that I had were like a QBasic compiler. Then I got something like Turbo Pascal and some C compilers. And in terms of learning resources, I remember having a pretty big, chunky book about C++. And I learned somewhere that people that were making games were using C++. So I started learning that, and it was literally just myself, the book, a computer that was sort of. I remember when the computer was hanging, sometimes I would freeze it, probably due to my faults as an early age programmer. I would actually have to switch the thing off and start it back up. So
Right.
that was a different experience to what we have these days, I guess. So yeah, that was a little while ago, and I went to uni, so like nothing out of the ordinary in terms of how my education went. I was interested quite a lot in maths and computing, so I went for a degree in computer engineering. So I did all of that in Italy, and then around 12 years ago, I moved to the UK for work, and since then I did a few jobs. Initially I was a graduate kind of developer, but I was always quite interested in coding, so on the side I was kind of always learning different things and trying things out. And at one point I got into mobile app development. That was already a few years after the iPhone came out, but when I started doing things with that, I was like, okay, this is me for the next few years. Like I really liked the iOS ecosystems, and I wanted to make mobile apps. I bought maybe a little bit too much into it, but I guess in terms of being in the right place at the right time, that was a good choice, because where I'm based in London, there were definitely a lot of jobs as an iOS developer. And so I did that for quite a long while. At that time, I also started kind of exploring blogging as a platform a little bit. So I started a little blog in Jekyll, writing about iOS development.
Oh, yeah.
Then I discovered Medium. So I used that for a little while. It was more like a hobby thing. And then I also enjoyed open sourcing things. So like GitHub was rising at the time, and I thought, I guess, all the cool people are doing this, so maybe I should try open sourcing things as well. And also, I guess it was born out of a necessity to kind of take my code across projects and be able to reuse it. So how can I repackage it and do this in a way that I can just reuse it and share across projects? And then it has the benefit that I guess people can also fork it or use it by themselves if they want.
Really cool. What sort of stuff did you open source?
Yeah, I think at the beginning I was just writing small libraries for iOS. So maybe, simple UI components or things to make certain tasks easier. Like I remember at some point I was working on a project for entering text into forms. And at the time there wasn't a very easy way of making the content scroll and the keywords and the keyboard play nicely. So I was trying to automate, and just in general, trying to write little tools to make life easier. And then eventually I wrote a tool that was for in-app purchases on iOS. And that was at the time when Swift was just launched. Maybe Swift 2 came out, and the existing APIs for doing in-app purchases on iOS were really not that great. There were already some Objective-C libraries, because what was coming out of the box wasn't good or user-friendly enough. But yeah, I made this project on Swift. It's called Swifty Store Kit. And I just made it out of necessity because I was building like a little app for myself. So initially it had a very small feature set, but then, I don't know, somehow it got popular and people started contributing and also asking for new feature requests. So I entered this kind of cycle of, I guess, adding features and seeing the project grow. And eventually it did grow to be very popular. And so I became more like a maintainer. And that kind of journey went on for a few years. So that was unexpectedly popular. But also, I guess I started feeling the pain points of being an open source maintainer and the lack of, I guess, financial reward that comes with it. And also with certain things, it's actually hard to do good testing, especially when it's not just to do with your code, but also with configurations and backends and things like that. So eventually I kind of handed over that project to other people that wanted to carry out working on it as a community effort. But that was a good experience, yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, we all owe the open source maintainers a huge debt. I think everybody in the programming community. It's such a powerful way to help out others. So that's really cool. I didn't know that you'd had that involvement in open source.
Yeah, I think open source in a way actually has more impact than what you can even do as a content creator. Maybe as a content creator, it's easier to monetize your experience. But as an open source developer, if you build something that is actually really valuable, then it goes into thousands of products. And I can see that now as well with the Flutter community and a lot of the packages that are being published. Some of them go into thousands of apps, and I really appreciate like the work that goes behind maintaining those packages.
100%. And if we look at where you are now and this journey you've been on, were there any particular moments where you decided to really focus on things like Flutter?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that I jumped into Flutter almost by chance. So for the last few years, I was also freelancing quite a bit. Like at some point, I just felt that careers were never really the thing for me. Like the idea of staying at a company for a long time was never appealing. So I decided to go and do freelancing work. And again, being in London was a very good way of doing that. So I was at some point hired to do a contract building a project on iOS. And then when that project finished, they put me on a different project where they had full buy-in to do it all with Flutter and Google platform.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know about Flutter at the time, but I just started working on it. And you know, within a couple of weeks, I think the initial scope was just to build a prototype for the client to see that we could actually build what they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I was just amazed by how quickly I could turn something around with no previous knowledge of the actual framework. And Flutter was still quite early days back then, but even if it was a beta or even before the beta, it was stable enough that we could build something with it in a very short amount of time. And so to me, I mean, something clicked there and I thought this is going to be big. Like, when people didn't know about it, I just had this idea in my mind that was going to be a big thing. And so alongside working on that project, I just started writing articles and making some videos. And I think the motivation was that, I could just see that, for example, I missed the boat on the iOS kind of content creation thing. And at the time, the ecosystem was already very mature. There were a lot of established instructors putting out like amazing work, and I never thought I could even be on the same level as them. But because Flutter was so new, it was an opportunity for content creators, and so I decided to dive in. And so for a little while I carried on doing client work, but also using Flutter and kind of writing open source and writing articles, doing videos. The whole content creation, especially the video side of it, was completely new to me. So yeah, I bought a microphone and some of the essential tools, but I didn't
Yeah.
really know what makes a good video. I didn't have any concept of it. I didn't know anything about video production. I just started putting things out there. And if I look back at my first videos, I find them a bit embarrassing in terms of like some of the things I was doing. But I guess just like with anything else, when you learn, you cannot get better over time, and
Yeah.
you find your way. It's not actually, I'd say you can find your way as a content creator in terms of making interesting stuff, and then to actually scale it to something that you can make a living on is a whole other pair of shoes. But yeah, I think I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and I think you people can infer from what you were just describing. But for those who haven't come across Flutter, do you want to just briefly explain what it is?
Yeah, it's basically a UI toolkit made by Google that allows you to build apps on mobile, web, and desktop across, and make them all work on multiple platforms with a single code base. So Flutter, I guess it's inspired by React in some of the kind of principles and in some of the ways in which it works, but in other ways it's quite different also. It uses a different programming language, so it's not JavaScript, but it's Dart, which is a language by Google. And what really, like I was saying before, I was impressed by what I could do quickly with Flutter, and a lot of it boiled down to the developer experience as well.
Right.
And one thing that really, at least for me, made the difference compared to the tools I was using before is how productive it was. And that boils down to a lot of different things. So Flutter is open source, so it's easier, I guess, to look up the documentation and find things that people need. The whole development tool set is amazing. Like with Dart, you have hot reload, and that's something that coming from iOS native development, at least at the time, was not something that was there. So being able to just
Mm.
edit the code and see the results update instantly, it was pretty good. And also, I guess there's a paradigm change in terms of going from imperative style programming, which is what I was used to before, to more like a declarative programming style, which is actually a trend that now is shared not only with Flutter but also with React and Swift UI.
Yep.
So there's definitely a trend in front-end development towards this kind of declarative and reactive mobile application frameworks. So Flutter is one of them, but I just think it does a really good job at it. And so I think it ticks a lot of the boxes in terms of what you want to see as a developer to be productive. And so for me, it clicked, and it's maybe still relatively new, but a lot of people are waking up to it and to the fact that it's a good candidate for building products and mobile apps and products on web as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck by the quote on your site where you're saying that you think Flutter is the future of mobile app development. Do you still feel that?
I'd say yes. I mean, I guess it boils down to, are you convinced yourself that it is? Will others think the same? But also the bigger picture, where is it going as a whole? What's the whole community behind it, and what does it allow people to do? And I think it is. I mean, now there are good tools like, well, React actually came before Flutter. And also Swift UI is something that, at least on Apple platforms, is something that is really gaining traction and people are using and liking a lot. But I guess the difference is that with Flutter, you really go multi-platform. You're not limited to the Apple ecosystem. And so from a business point of view, if you had to deliver a proposition across iOS and Android and desktop and web and like all these different platforms, I think it is the only framework that allows you to do that with the same level of quality that you will get on native. It's not production ready for web yet. It still has a few problems, and the team is working on kind of improving that. But just the fact that you can already get a really good quality kind of experience on mobile, if you're building something mobile first, to me, Flutter is the first choice. And as a bonus, you might get to deliver on web with an improved experience in the future.
Yeah, no, those are very powerful and attractive capabilities. How do you think Flutter stacks up against, say, like React Native?
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything too opinionated about it, simply because I've only used React Native for maybe a few weeks. On that note, though, in a way, React Native is what got me into Udemy, because at some point I wanted to build something in React Native just to try out. And that's where I discovered a course on Udemy by one of the popular instructors, and I took that. And so while I was learning that, I also thought, Udemy, okay, that's interesting. So there's actually good courses on it, and as a developer, I could emphasize with what the instructor was teaching, and I also thought this is something that in the future I could do myself. But I guess coming back to your question, yeah, I mean, React Native comes from a different angle, in the sense that we already had the React, we already had JavaScript and a big ecosystem behind it, and a lot of people that knew JavaScript. And so I guess React Native is this attempt to bring, I guess, the same language that people are familiar with into native app development. And probably by now I even forgotten most of what I learned about React Native. But I guess the programming style is not entirely different. I don't think out of the box it is as good as Flutter, but I guess I'm not gonna say a lot more than that, because I just don't feel like I have enough knowledge of React Native to make a fair assessment.
Fair enough. And you just touched on how it was that initial learning that introduced you to Udemy and got you thinking, yeah, I could make a course like this. What was that journey like then, to creating the first course and then deciding to go on and create more courses?
Yeah, so I guess before I even got into that, I wanted to validate this idea that I could make videos, and people would be interested. And I didn't know that up front. So I started with YouTube, and I didn't even know that people at the time were going on YouTube to look for programming videos. I didn't even know who the top instructors were on Udemy. I just didn't know anything. I just started posting videos there, and people liked them. I did like a first small application. So I did like a video, a series with just 6 videos about how you would build an authentication flow with Flutter and Firebase. And that was pretty much me learning how to do it and then doing a video about it. But that was very popular. And I guess that's because most apps need authentication. So whoever wanted to get their hands dirty with Flutter, they were starting to build some of these things. And so that series, I guess, was what people were looking for. So I don't think at the time I was that much of a good instructor, but I think it already proved that people wanted to see more content like that. So then I guess I was kind of continuing to learn the tools of the trade and getting a bit better at it. I did a few other videos that went well, and then I decided to take the leap and create a course. And initially I thought maybe I can just do it. I don't know, how long could it take me? Maybe 3 months, 4 months, 5 tops. And I was still kind of doing a lot of client work at the time. So I thought, okay, let's start this. So I started in maybe October 2018, and I already had pretty much all the code ready to go for the project. So I just had to, I guess, script it and record it. Yeah, it wasn't ready until September last year. It took me like 11 months to launch the first course. But I think part of the reason was that I wanted to make a complete course, and I was keeping an eye on Udemy, what was going on. And I could already see some pretty big courses coming up on top. And so I thought, yes, I can probably teach to the same level that these other instructors are doing, but if I want to compete, I just assumed that I had to make a big course and cover everything. And so it took me a long, long time to get there. I think it took me too long, probably. If I could launch it earlier, I think it would have been more successful. And on Udemy, it really is about finding the right topic and getting there at the right time with a good course. And if you miss that, then it's harder to make up for it. So I think, yeah, it was a good learning experience. I tried to, I guess, do the best course I could with the knowledge that I had at the time. And then the way I went about it was to also make it private first. So after I had maybe 30% of the content done, I shared it with some of the people that I kind of signed up with my newsletter. And so for a few months, I had this kind of schedule of pushing updates and releasing new content and getting people slowly, more people to subscribe and leave reviews. And so then after I launched, turns out that November is the biggest month for sales. I had no idea. I had no idea about Udemy Works either. But yeah, it went fairly well in terms of like first launch. It wasn't like living kind of money. It was a little bit of money on the side. But yeah, the feedback was very good. And then I guess it was a case of where do you go next from that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that it's certainly true that some of these Udemy courses you see out there, these complete courses have 20 plus hours of content at times, and that takes a long time to create.
Yeah.
It's a big project. Um, and, like you say, you took your time to create the first one, but it seems to have paid off well for you in the sense that your students are giving you excellent reviews, right? I mean, a 4.7 average is exceptionally high, particularly once you've got more than 20,000 students like you do. What sort of factors do you think contribute to your students rating your courses so highly?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess, I've been already a developer for a long time before I started making courses. So I felt that I have a range of kind of experience and skills that if I could just consolidate into a course, then that would make it like a valuable learning experience for students. And also, I guess, prior to making courses, as I said, I was freelancing for quite a long time. So all these years of building different things, you get a feeling for what things work and what things don't work so much. So I guess I just tried to put all my knowledge into one course, and what I was building in that course was using the same kind of tools, some of the same libraries that I was still using in my kind of client work. So that, I guess, was real world application development, but still kind of structured in a way that works well for a course, or at least the best effort I could do at it. Yeah, I mean, I was nowhere near the size of the audience or the other instructors, so I was quite amazed that it went as well as it did, because like, yeah, if you look at the top people, like they have courses on just about everything, like every programming language, all the main frameworks, they cover it all. And so it was quite amazing to be pretty close to that. And so, yeah, I would say I had the experience and knowledge as a developer myself, but I think there was no guarantee that I could kind of reach those levels. But I just gave it a shot, I guess, and I continued still working on the side. I guess everyone has different. Some people might be more risk averse. Some people might be more conservative. Some people might just quit their job and do this and do something completely new. And I always try to keep a balance. So I think that worked fairly well for me.
Mm. Yeah, there's definitely a different level of risk tolerance different instructors have. Okay, and then for those students who are looking at your courses and wondering if they should give Flutter or Dart a try, and what it might do for their career, what advice would you have?
Yeah, I guess it depends a lot on what you're trying to build. Like I was saying, Flutter is very good on mobile. So if you want to build a product that needs a good experience on mobile, then I think Flutter is very, very strong on that. On the other hand, if you need to build a website, even a complex website with good performance, then at this point in time, it's probably still not the best way to go. There is already a much more mature ecosystem on web, and like I said, it revolves around JavaScript and all the other frameworks like React, Vue, Svelte. And also there's the aspect of getting a job. So some people might be learning to code, yes, because they like it, but eventually they want to get a job. So it's worth considering where the job opportunities are. And of course, I mean, Flutter is growing very quickly. Things are picking up a bit, but the JavaScript ecosystem is absolutely huge. So I think for a long time there will be more jobs on those tools, and also native app development is probably there to stay for a little while still. So I mean, the whole Apple ecosystem is still quite strong. So I wouldn't say it's a bad choice for people right now to be going down the iOS and Apple route if they wanted to to have jobs for the future. Like it's still pretty strong. But it boils down to what your motivation is, I guess. If you are someone who wants to build its own product, or maybe start an agency or freelance, or a startup, then I think Flutter is great for all those things.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Okay. And Andrea, what's next for you? What are you working on?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it the other day. Like, what am I working on? It's like all the things that I would like to work on would probably require three full-time jobs, but I'm not even like doing a full one. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm trying to do, because I guess it's not only about the courses itself. Like, I spend a lot of time making content and courses on Udemy, but I also have a YouTube channel. I have a website, and I do various other things in the Flutter community. So I guess it's a balance of kind of keeping on top of all these different things. And obviously I need to have a bit of a preference for the things that generate revenue for me, but I like to try to keep things balanced. So I think, over the next year, I want to try to establish myself a little bit more on Udemy. It's still early days for me. And at the same time, I want to grow my website, add some features. And I've been actually, I discovered Indie Hackers just 3 months ago. And I found like it's an amazing community in terms of there is so much knowledge being shared, and not something that I even knew was available. So now I'm getting like new ideas about how to do things, and what new creative efforts I could kind of take in the future. So I guess for me, it's an interesting time to be looking at all these things. Yeah.
Exciting stuff. Lots of options and opportunities for you.
Yeah.
So for listeners, where can they go to find out more about your courses and you?
Yeah. Well, the main thing, I guess the main point of entry to all my material is my website. So it's called codewithandrea.com. And that has, videos, articles, tips, and courses all about Dart and Flutter app development. So I guess, that is the main, platform or portal that I created to try to get people to learn with my content. So I would say that's a good place to start. With that being said, we work in tech, things move very, very fast. And I realized a long time ago that there's no way that I can always be on top of everything myself. And for newcomers, actually, it can be a good thing. Like, there's actually a lot of good free content and a lot of materials for people to learn with. Certainly a big difference from my C++ book from 20 years ago. I'm actually learning a ton of stuff on YouTube about things that have nothing to do with programming these days. So for people that want to learn and spend the time doing it, there are a lot of good avenues to do that.
That's a great journey, from C++ book 20 years ago to teaching online now. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that links to your website are in the show notes. And Andrea, thank you ever so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I hope it will be valuable to others. Yeah.
Bye for now then.
Okay, thank you.